If you play any kind of sport, especially something like basketball, you've probably felt it. You know, that moment you cut hard to one side and just feel that your other leg isn't quite there with you.
Oh, absolutely. You might be jumping high, you might feel fast overall, but you know deep down that one side is doing most of the work.
And that imbalance, that asymmetry, it's not just about losing a step. It feels like a weakness, almost like a ticking clock for an injury.
It really is. It can be the silent killer of an athletic career. An athlete might have fantastic numbers, a great vertical, a fast sprint time, but if they're always compensating for a weaker limb, that whole system is compromised.
It's like having a race car with one tire slightly deflated.
That's a perfect analogy. The performance looks good for now, but under pressure, the risk of a catastrophic failure goes way, way up.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how we can scientifically fix that imbalance. And we're going to look at one of the most common tools in the shed, plyometric jump training.
Right, but with a twist. We're asking what happens when you train both legs together versus training them one at a time. Do they both help with symmetry? Or, and this is the key question, does one of these methods actually make the problem worse?
And we're not just guessing here, we have some incredible research to guide us.
We really do. We're diving into an article titled Effects of Unilateral, Bilateral, and Combined Plyometric Jump Training on Asymmetry of Muscular Strength and Power and Change of Direction in Youth Male Basketball Players.
That is a mouthful.
It is, but it tells you everything you need to know. It's by JianChun and a team of researchers, and it was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine back in 2024.
So let's focus on that basketball angle. Why is leg asymmetry so critical in that sport? I mean, why not just focus on getting your overall vertical leap as high as possible?
Because basketball is almost never a symmetrical, straightforward movement. Think about it. A defensive slide, a jump stop, exploding off one foot for a layup.
Yeah.
It's all asymmetrical.
Right.
And when you have what the researchers call unfunctional asymmetries, these are the big problematic imbalances, your body starts to cheat. It develops these compensatory movement patterns.
And that affects everything, I imagine.
Everything, your balance, your coordination, and most critically, how you absorb force when you land. And that's a non-negotiable part of staying healthy and performing at your best.
So the old wisdom of just do plyos to get more powerful is a little too simplistic. This paper is asking how we should be jumping to get balanced, not just more powerful.
Exactly. For years, studies would compare unilateral training, or UT.
That's the single leg stuff.
Right. Versus bilateral training, or BT, which is using both legs. And they'd only look at the performance numbers. Did the athlete jump higher? Did they cut faster? They kind of missed the bigger picture.
Which is the symmetry itself.
The symmetry itself. I mean, if your training makes you jump an inch higher, but also doubles your risk of a knee injury, is that really a win? This study really hones in on that missing piece of the puzzle.
So tell us about the setup. Who are they looking at and what did they actually have them do?
The study was done on 66 male youth basketball players. They're all about 16 years old, so right in that prime development window.
And they were already training, right? This wasn't for beginners?
Correct. They were all in regular basketball training.
Yeah.
The researchers then randomly split them into 4 groups for an 8-week program, training just twice a week.
Okay, so what were these 4 groups?
So first you had the unilateral training group, the UT group. They did only single-leg plyometrics. Think one-legged hops, single-leg box jumps, that sort of thing.
Forcing each leg to work on its own.
Precisely. Then you had the bilateral training, or BT group. They did similar drills, but always with 2 feet. Standard box jumps, squat jumps.
The stuff you see in most gyms?
The stuff you see everywhere. Third was a combined group, the UBT group. They split the difference. 1 unilateral session and 1 bilateral session each week.
And the 4th group?
The control group. They just kept up with their regular basketball training, no extra plyometrics. This gives us a baseline to compare against.
And I'm guessing they made sure the total number of jumps was the same for all the training groups?
They did. That's so important. The volume was standardized, starting at around 100 jumps a week and going up to 150. So the only real variable was whether they were using 1 leg or 2.
All right, so before we get to the results, how did they measure all this stuff? Because feeling balanced isn't exactly scientific.
Not at all. They use a whole suite of tests with force plates and photocells to get objective data. They looked at static strength with things like an isometric squat test.
The IST?
Yep. And an isometric knee flexor strength test, or KFS. Then for dynamic power, they used a unilateral counter movement jump, the UCMJ, to see how high and forcefully they could jump off a single leg.
And what about landing? That seems critical for injury prevention.
It is. They used a leg land and hold test, the LHT, to measure the peak force during a drop landing. That tells you how well each leg can absorb impact.
And of course, the on-court performance.
Right. The classic 505 change of direction test to measure agility.
So they have all these numbers for the left leg, all these numbers for the right leg. How do you boil that down into one single score for imbalance?
They used a really clever metric called the symmetry angle.
The symmetry angle.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to see how far you are from a perfect 50-50 split between your limbs. And the great thing about it, and why the authors chose it, is that it's robust. It doesn't get thrown off just because an athlete got stronger overall. It isolates the asymmetry.
So if that angle goes down, you're getting more balanced, even if your total jump height also goes up.
Exactly. It's a pure measure of balance.
Okay, let's get to it. 8 weeks later, what happened? Let's start with the overall performance.
Well, the first part wasn't a huge surprise. All three training groups, UT, BT, and the combined UBT, got significantly better across all 5 tests.
So jumping makes you better at jumping and cutting. Shocking.
Right, it confirms the basics of plyometrics. But here's the first really interesting insight. The authors noted there were no substantial differences among the 3 methods for those overall performance gains.
So whether you did 1 leg, 2 legs, or a mix, you got stronger and faster by about the same amount.
Pretty much. Which might lead a coach to just stick with bilateral training because, it's often easier to teach and manage.
And I sense a big but coming. That's where we have to look at the asymmetry. What happened to the symmetry angle?
And this is where it gets fascinating. This is the big twist. The unilateral training group and the combined group, both of them significantly reduced their asymmetries. Their legs became more balanced.
Okay, that makes sense. You force the weak leg to work, it gets stronger, the gap closes. What about the other group?
This is the finding that should make every strength coach pause. The bilateral training group, the BT group, actually increased their asymmetries.
Well, what? So they got more powerful overall, but the gap between their strong and weak leg got wider.
That's exactly what the data showed. The most common form of plyometric training was, in fact, making these athletes more structurally imbalanced.
That is a huge deal. That completely challenges the idea of using bilateral jumps as your only tool, especially if your goal is to keep athletes healthy.
It absolutely does. And the data just keeps reinforcing how good the unilateral approach is for balance. When you compare it to the control group, only the UT group showed a statistically significant improvement in reducing asymmetry.
Can you give us some numbers on that?
Sure. Compared to the control group, the UT group reduced their asymmetry in the isometric squat by 1.2%, in the knee flexor strength by a really significant 2.5%, and in the landing test by 1.1%.
Those might sound like small percentages, but in the world of elite athletics where an injury can happen in a split second, that's a massive difference.
It's the difference between a knee holding strong on a hard cut and it buckling. It tells us the UT isn't just an option. For fixing imbalances, it's clearly the most effective one.
So let's dig into the why here. What's the mechanism that makes unilateral training so much better for balance?
It really boils down to compensation, or rather the lack of it.
What do you mean?
In a unilateral exercise, the weaker leg has nowhere to hide. It's forced to work independently. You've essentially taken away the safety net of the dominant leg.
So it can't just let the strong side take over.
It can't. That weaker leg is suddenly hit with a functional demand that's way higher than anything it would face in a 2-legged movement.
And that forces it to adapt.
Exactly. It drives balanced muscle growth. It enhances the neuromuscular coordination for that specific limb. It even improves proprioception.
Which is your body's sense of where it is in space.
Right. It's like a targeted intervention. You're forcing the brain to send more resources to stabilize and strengthen that one specific side. And you can see it in the raw numbers. The UT group showed superior gains in the left leg's performance on its own. It was actively building up that weaker side.
Okay, so if UT fixes the problem, let's revisit that bilateral backlash. Why did the BT group get more lopsided?
Because bilateral training is great for improving total power and overall neural drive. But it allows the dominant leg to keep being dominant.
It lets the strong leg compensate.
It does. The stronger leg just takes on a little more of the load, the weaker leg gets a bit of a free ride, and the athlete still produces a big, powerful jump. The total output looks great.
So a coach just looking at the jump height chart would think everything is going perfectly.
And all the while, the training is quietly increasing the athlete's risk profile. It's improving the system's output, but compromising its structural integrity.
That's a huge, actionable takeaway for any coach or athlete listening.
It is. The advice from this is very direct. Unilateral training is incredibly effective for both performance and for reducing these dangerous asymmetries. It should be a part of the program.
What about the combined approach? That also seemed to work well.
It did. The UET group also reduced asymmetry, and it was better than the BT group alone. So that offers a nice balance if a coach wants to keep some bilateral work in the mix. But for targeting and fixing an imbalance, UT is the clear winner.
Now, we always have to be responsible and talk about the boundaries of the research. What limitations did the authors themselves point out?
And that's a sign of good science, acknowledging what you don't know. First, the sample was specific. Only youth male basketball players. We can't automatically say these results would be the same for, say, female soccer players.
Different bodies, different movement patterns.
Exactly. Also, the study was 8 weeks long. That's a decent amount of time, but a longer study would tell us more about the long-term effects.
Right.
They also noted that in the real world, it's tough to make sure every team's regular training is identical. And finally, they only used unilateral tests in their analysis. It would have been interesting to see a bilateral vertical jump test included to see how that translated.
That context is important for sure. But even with those limitations, that central finding is so powerful. In a sports world that is obsessed with maximizing total power, we have to look at the cost.
We do. All 3 methods made the athletes more powerful. But focusing only on that total power, like the BT group did, came at the cost of balance and potentially increased injury risk.
Which brings up a really provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. If you're an athlete or you're a coach, are you willing to accept a hidden, increased risk just to chase a slightly higher number on a test?
And this study really argues that you don't have to make that choice. You can have both. You can get the high performance and lower your risk by training smarter, by incorporating that unilateral work.
This feels like incredibly powerful evidence for a safer way to develop athletes.
Absolutely. And for anyone out there who really wants to get into the weeds, we strongly encourage you to look up the original article. Tables 3 and 4 have all the granular data showing the specific changes for each leg. It's essential reading if you're designing training programs.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into performance symmetry. If you enjoyed getting into the science of how to build better, safer athletes, make sure you follow the channel and turn on those notifications.
That way you won't miss our next breakdown of cutting-edge sports science research.